Welcome to Another Thing. I'm Larry Menti. If you're a parent, you undoubtedly struggle with how much time your child should spend in front of a screen, especially when screens are everywhere. The TV, computers, tablets, iPhones, video games. Well, now the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out with recommendations. We'll talk with someone from the Academy in just a moment. But we start our coverage at Ground Zero with Kolodziej at a home with kids. Ellen.
Thank you, Larry. The American Academy of Pediatrics recently relaxed its guidelines about how much screen time kids of all ages should get. And for a lot of busy parents, that's good news.
Cam and Addie Doherty are 2.5-year-old twins who sometimes watch educational shows like Sesame Street.
To be honest, I think it's helped their vocabulary and the way that they handle things and express themselves. They can count, they recognize letters and numbers.
Their mom, Katie, says she's never been worried about negative effects of any screen time.
My husband is a doctor, and he said growing up he watched a ton of TV. It was never regulated, and he says, he's obviously a well-educated person. So we never really were strict about it now.
These three mothers all agree that a little bit of technology is absolutely fine. But when the kids get older, it becomes a lot harder for mothers like Heather Chicory, who has a 10-year-old daughter.
But now with Izzy, with her iPod Touch, that's more of a worry to me than TV, because it's more of like, I feel like she gets really into it and she just zones out. Right. But we do restrict it, like after a certain time at night, she's not allowed to have the phone on or go on her phone or her iPod Touch.
Lisa O'Mara says she's pretty laid back and doesn't really adhere to any formal guidelines, but she and her husband were proactive when they thought their daughters Lauren and Samantha were watching a little too much TV.
My husband and I discussed it, and he said, I'd like to get rid of the million channels that we have on TV. He said, so we went to basic cable. So the kids couldn't watch, they couldn't sit there and just change the channel and just try to find something.
The American Academy of Pediatrics admits it has to change with the times, so it shifted its focus to become more realistic in this high-tech age. And all these moms agree, some screen time is fine in moderation, and these new guidelines give them a little sense of relief.
It makes you feel like, okay, I didn't hurt them as a child watching television. And nowadays, I don't feel as bad if they're sitting there vegging out in front of the TV for a little while, just to kind of relax and, take it easy.
Yeah, it definitely makes me feel better. Every mom has their doubts about whether they're doing the right thing, but this definitely helped me feel a little better about what we do here.
As long as I monitor it, I feel like I'm doing a good job as a parent.
So all the experts do agree that it's a good idea to get your kids away from the screen sometime so they don't turn into zombies. Their advice, obviously, is to get the kids outside, get them to keep playing, and keep them active. Reporting for Another Thing, I'm Kolodziej.
All right, thank you, Ellen. To talk more now about how much time your child should be spending on the internet in front of a device is Dr. Puthan Madam Radhakrishna with the New Jersey chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. This is a huge topic with parents. I have a 12 and a 10-year-old. I go to events with other parents. They talk about it all of the time, and it seems like nobody has the right answer yet. Does the Academy have recommendations?
Yeah, actually we had our national conference in September in San Francisco. This last month in September. And it's being published in the Journal of Pediatrics next month. And we've come out with recommendations that we feel are true to the 21st century, because a lot of our policies were in tune with what we felt were appropriate 20, 30 years ago. And as times have changed and we realize that things have changed and you can't go anywhere where there's no exposure to screen at this time, we felt that it was important that we bring about policy statements that are more in tune to what parents are looking for at this time in way of recommendations. Like, for example, we still feel that children under the age of 18 months should not have any screen time. They don't learn anything from it. They don't recognize 2D images and can't differentiate them from 3D images.
Do you believe it does any harm?
We do believe that at some point, not only does it not create any true educational or developmental features, it may sometimes delay their developmental features also at this point. So under 18 months, we're recommending it. No FaceTime. I mean, no FaceTime in the meaning of no FaceTime with TV or the iPad or
really,
the internet.
not even TV?
No.
So Brainy Baby and all of those
but
videos you can buy?
We do differentiate from true FaceTime, such as Skype or going on FaceTime and talking to grandparents or talking with relatives, and a true person on the other end who's interacting with a child. That is very important, and we feel that adds to the culture of the child. But not TV, not any of these programs that you go into a store and they say educational on them, but they don't necessarily mean that it's interactive or developing the developmental skills of this child.
But the problem isn't with, and I understand why they made the recommendation, but the problem isn't with 18 months and younger. It's when the child can grab a device and understand what it does and control it on their own that it seems to be a problem. What are your recommendations as the child gets older?
Well, between the age of 2 and 6 and the preschool age group that we're talking about next, we're recommending a limit on the time that the child spends in front of the TV. We think it's very important that children be active, that they interact with people, that their learning experiences are all guided with interaction with parents or the caregiver, whether that be in a daycare setting, whether that be in an interactive play session, or whether that be at home at bedtime. And it's very important that the recommendations basically go in tune, because we do know that it affects their quality of sleep, it affects the quality of their learning, it affects their speech patterns, it affects their developmental behavior. So we feel this all needs to be guided, and at all times in that preschool age group, it should be supervised, it should be interactive with a parent or a caregiver. And interactive, I mean, where the parent's giving them something to do and the child is responding with it, not just sitting in front of a TV watching the program tell you something and asking you to do something, but that's really not interactive.
Let's keep getting older, because you're getting near the age of my kids.
Right. So once you get to that school age group, we realize that there are things that they need to use screen time for, whether that be researching for a homework, whether they're studying for an examination, whether they're preparing for some of the so-called standardized testing, stuff like that. We don't want to include that in screen time, because that's really educational at that point. We're talking about screen time as playing video games or interacting on Facebook or social book. And we found that 70% of all kids in the school age group we know have more than one social media account right now. So you can't be saying, okay, you're doing 1 hour on Facebook, 1 hour on Twitter. You got to include that all. So basically 1 to 2 hours of entertainment screen time is appropriate.
You're including a TV in that?
Correct.
Because fewer and fewer kids are watching TV. They're now watching videos on YouTube.
And they're watching TV on YouTube, on the TV too, on the smartphone too at this point.
Do you have any recommendations, and this plays into this, in when you should give a child their own device, when they should have a phone or an iPad?
That's a very tough call. And the reason being that, each county, community has its own norms. If you have a community where everybody's a two-parent family where both parents are working and the child's basically a latchkey kid coming home, the parents are concerned about their security. So obviously they're going to give a kid a phone earlier. Whereas if you have a teenager who's in high school and everybody has a phone, they want a phone too now. So it may not be that they need it at home, but it's more so that it's the norm at that age. And also what is the need for communication? If you have a child who does a lot of extracurricular activities after school and the parents need to keep in touch with them or her, then obviously that's a need there that you need to address.
There certainly is a fallback that parents have, and it's an easy fallback that parents have. Let's say if you're out at a restaurant, your kids have a tendency to act up. You give them advice, they're going to be good. If you are out with, and you have friends over, you give them a device, you let them use it, they're going to be good. So it's really the device as a babysitter.
And that's what we're trying to discourage at this point.
Really?
Totally, because that's what we're saying. At home, you want to have areas or screen-free areas.
But
basically.
it's easier said than done. Are you
totally
a parent?
Is. Yes, I am. It's very, very hard to do, but it's very important to do. The dining table, that's not an area where you want to have the kids be watching their screen all the time. They need to be talking to you. Even when you have screen time in front of the TV, the importance of it is if you have a TV in the family room and you don't have TVs in the bedrooms, it's going to interact. You're going to have more interaction. You're going to have the kids talking to you about the programming. And you might ask them, well, do you ever do this? Do you do that in school? And you get answers and you start talking and a conversation ensues. So a lot of times you even forget that the TV's on at that point. And especially with younger children, we're saying when you're talking to them, when you're reading a book, turn the TV off. And a lot of times kids pick up on what the parents are doing. So we're very, very interested in telling parents, that when you're talking to a child, the last thing we want you to do is being on that phone and texting somebody else. Give all your attention to the child. It's very important.
We have this new economy coming that I don't know if we're prepared for. We don't have enough kids that code. We don't have enough kids that know software engineering. Is it possible that the way we look, and I know you've been trying to fix this in your new recommendations, the way we look at the internet and the way we look at these devices sometimes is backward thinking, that is the future, and by pushing back against their time, we're actually trying to go back to a time that doesn't exist anymore and not preparing them for the future?
Well, what we're asking is that basically let the little babies and little kids be kids. When they get to that stage where they need to learn, like when they're in high school, you want to encourage them. But the whole point of encouraging is to make sure that you understand where they're going with this. It should always be guided. You never want to, you wouldn't take a child and say, okay, here's a bike, go ride it on the street. You would basically hold them first, you would show them how to do it, and then you would basically supervise them for a little while. The same thing should be true for the internet. When you're there and you're starting them off on that journey, you want to be able to guide them and tell them, okay, this is the route you want to take. And then you let them go. You let them be a little independent, and then you watch what they do. But as long as you have that interaction, the communication going on with your children, I think you'll find that it's going to be a very, very enriching experience.
So you just want a balance.
Correct.
And as long as you have that balance, it's a healthy environment.
Totally.
I would imagine even if you say you can't be on the internet, that's not healthy either.
Correct. Absolutely. You don't want a child who's isolated and not have any friends and not be able to interact with anybody, because everybody's interacting on these social media now. So you need them to be able to interact too, but it's got to be appropriate and enriching interaction. I just saw a TV show the other day where they were showing that they have a new holding apparatus for a baby bottle where the parent can put their phone on there and be on the phone at the same time that they're feeding the bottle. That's kind of, that's ludicrous. The last thing you want to do is, at the time of feeding a baby is to be interacting with some other people. You want to be bonding with the child.
Oh, there's going to be more. There's going to be more. There's going to be an app for everything.
Sure there is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Dr. Puthan Madam Radhakrishna with the New Jersey chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. When we come back.
Time for your yearly flu shot reminder, but did they get the serum right this year? We have the answer next.